All right, we're back. Part two, easy to understand, hard to do. And, and I'm going to continue mentioning David D. and Daniel S. Thank you for your contributions, guys. And David D., particularly for your recurring, for all this time and all it's meant to us. All right, we're doing part two of our series. And the series, easy to understand, hard to do, starts with this question from Shawn V. Shawn is studying with me in person right now, by the way. But he came up with this as form of an email. I wonder what you found to be the top 5 or 10 most challenging things to articulate to your students. What are the most common problematical obstacles you found consistent with all your students? What are the most challenging aspects of sharing this method with your students? I know I'm not precisely answering all these things. The most challenging aspects of sharing this method with students is it requires a certain amount of background and confidence in drawing. That might be the best answer to that last question there. But in the meantime, let's just go forward. What I am doing is walking through things you would have already heard about before. And we've talked about it. My modality, my mentality about this whole thing is to talk about the same things more than once, and sometimes from new angles. So Shawn is sort of presenting this as a new angle thing. What are the top 5 or 10 most challenging things to articulate to my students? That's one thing. What are the most common problematical obstacles you found with your students? So I'm talking about those areas that are hardest to communicate and hardest for students to achieve regularly. How would I say that? To achieve good success on a regular basis, to be consistent in performing. So first of all, the understanding, and secondly, the performance thing. So last time we went through the naive eye, seeing flat, understanding and using the idea of getting the concept and doing it all the time. Every single minute you do anything, you work with a concept or don't make marks. Consistently watching the canvas to see what's happening. That is, say, so debrief, have to put something down, come back and have a look. And among other things, you're looking to see how it's hanging together. If it's hanging together and is unified for its relative development along the lines of how nature unifies with itself. So those, if you want to go back to that one, that's part one. Part two, the blurred eye and the limited but ongoing significance of coming out of the fog. Now, blurred eye has been difficult for me to teach because out here, I mean, you don't know what I mean. You don't know what my eye's doing. But if you can understand that the only thing I'm trying to do with getting one to blur one's eyes is to paint from the majors to the minors. Remember this idea of coming out of the fog. I was saying that what this coming out of the fog thing is the first, as I was trying to sort through how to paint, I was looking like all of you do at what to do first, second, and third. And the only thing in the Boston School body of knowledge, including GAML, or anything I learned before that, even the art students, like the only thing that I learned that suggested a process was paint as if you were coming out of a fog. Now, coming out of, that means there's a process that in the first phase of the fog, you just see the headlights, right? Can't even tell what they are. In the second one, you see the headlights and the fog lights. In the third one, well, you see the whole car, but it's a little late at that point, right? So if you follow me, that coming out of the fog is you're painting the strong guys. Then you get to the next level of strength, and then you guys finally get to the whole body of data out there, so to speak. Now, don't assume that we work in that simplistic an order, but there's an essential quality to that. So we blur the eye for the purpose of trying to understand what not to paint. Okay. And that's a very strange thing to say, isn't it? But so what we're saying, and I said it to you before in this whole discussion about the unity at the last part, that when you coming out of the fog is always about creating light effects, okay? I don't know how to come out of the fog just talking about colors. But we're talking about value, meeting value, and producing contrast called light effects, okay? And they are in an order of power. You'll see it on me. I can't tell you where exactly, but certain parts of my hands or whatever, face, glasses, highlights on glasses, things like that will be powerful to your eye. And I'm suggesting to you that there is a value in blurring your eyes and say, well, who are the guys I got to get under control first? That's just a way of saying we can start here as opposed to start with the outline of the objects or something like that. we, visually oriented around light as we are, and again, read Benson, as I've recommended to you before. Again, I'll say to you guys who don't know me that you can ask me for a copy of Benson's advice to his daughters. So much really excellent Boston School data there. By the way, I didn't find that data. Again, I didn't find that data when I was looking for the answer to this question. But he answers it pretty reasonably, or comes as close as anybody ever will. Eventually, so read that stuff as well, trying to understand what I'm talking about here. But the blurred eye, you blur down so you can just see who the 2 or 3 or 4 places are you want to articulate first. Then you go back and say, and try to see how they hang together, what kind of a configuration, what kind of a figure they create, right? That's what I call Arabesque, right? That figure created by those guys. That's me. That's me. Don't even listen to me when you think somebody else's ideas about Arabesque. The figure created by the leading effects of a picture is the way I'm using that word. So there's a figure created by the spots, and that figure has, if you don't have 30 spots, I'm talking about the top few, and that figure has a general height to width of it, a certain length, and a certain thickness to that length, and a certain tilt. And you're going to be good at that. And I'm suggesting to you that you're going to get a whole lot more pleasures out of this whole thing when you articulate those points with that initial best effort at the look of nature. And again, this is Bonnat saying make it as like as you can the first time. Well, the first time you're not going to make it brilliantly like, but make it as like as you can the first time. And get around to those 5 points. And by the time you've gotten to 3 of them, you'll be able to improve the first ones. But nevertheless, you follow what the idea is. You're blurring your eye to see what is that first group of things you're going to draw. And that's what tells you what to draw first, second, and third, okay? So that's the point of that. But if you don't blur your eyes down, if you don't know what that means or how to do it, and that's what I'm saying, close one eye and let the other one just go darker and darker and darker, and just notice the screen, again, that 2D screen, not looking in, and see who comes to you and note their order and their location and begin to address those. Now, when you're drawing, always keep your eyes wide open. So the whole purpose of the blurred eye is to tell you which ones to paint first, second, and third, not to paint them with a blurry, fuzzy eye, okay? So the second question, the second point of these, there's only 4 points today, but the second point is back straggler. There's a discipline about the back straggler. So we use the mentality of a back straggler. A Gamble would sometimes just call it the straggler. So if you have a whole set of things going on in your canvas and one of them is noticeably off, that's the straggler, right? So, but that's because you're looking at the whole field. And this is the part that I can't, often just people decide where they want to work, right? We all did. We don't know any better. But Gamble's process is way more likely to get you good results, consistent results. Find that thing which is least like. That was his expression. The thing which is least, that area which is least like. You can't find it except by looking at the whole. So if you can get away from your own ambitions and your own plans for this picture, no matter what you've got up there now, begin to look at the whole. And again, you have to take in the whole field on your canvas to understand this. And they should have unity already. They should already be trying to maintain unity. Well, it's the unity of the general impression. There's going to be somebody on there that's breaking the unity, right? That's not hanging in and not doing its job. And you're going to work on that part, right? So that's your back straggler. But so you choose it only when you're working on the whole. And the only thing I can tell you to do is Gamble would say, make sure you bring it up so it's not the back straggler anymore. But it's not going to be a thing. It's, well, in the sense of an object, it's going to be an edge, it's going to be a value, it's going to be the things we do, right? The sharpness of an edge, the contrast of values, it's going to be a color problem, it's going to be an angle problem of a shape. Do you see what I mean? We limit ourselves to those kinds of things, okay? So the back straggler, first of all, is an area. And then it's in the class of things that we can do with a paintbrush. We can make things darker and lighter, richer, less rich, etc., right? But you got to get the context of the whole. You know, one of the things that happens is you'll get the context of the whole and you'll see this area, there's something wrong in this area. That's all you need. Now you can go to the area while you're watching the whole stuff and ask yourself, what about it down there is funny? You know, what is the problem? And then get to naming it in the limited way that I just talked about. So is that clear? All right, so let's do point 3. How to simultaneously maintain 2D spatial relations and the visual order of effects, and not one at the expense of the other. Now, the reason I mention that is to you, Shawn, is because you have done frequently, you keep getting the visual effect order, but you don't have them aligned spatially just right. And so some people will simply say painting in visual order means, and it's my fault. This is me addressing things in a way that I haven't been given words for and then expect something from you. So I'm putting my own phrasing to all this sort of stuff. But painting in the visual order, I've expressed at times, means to literally paint the thing that's strongest first and next down that row. But there's also a spatial order. And you have to, when you're painting a scene, a rectangle, you also have to be aware of where the exits are and where the center of interest lies and all that. So there's a whole spatial thing that you're doing simultaneously, okay? So no matter what you do, you're doing also the other one. Now, you can only focus and do well on one, so I'm always recommending that you get the effect first and move it to the right place. You see what I'm saying? The right place is the spatial order. It's the order, this way, and that, how high, how low, and how far left and how right. So I hope that comes across, but try to maintain the idea of them simultaneously, not one and then the other. The alternative to that, and the reverse of that we try to get these things incorporated early, is to what people try to do, and this is where students come in, they keep trying to get the drawing right without the effects. And it doesn't work. But as I said to you just a minute ago, if you can get your effects right and realize that first handful of effects reasonably enough drawn and really related to each other, you're going to have the 3D world. Your canvas is going to be going 3D on you. And all of a sudden it becomes more of a one-to-one relationship. The guy used that phrase, he said, drawing is the interpretation of form. What is form? So the interpretation of form, is it shapes? So that you'll find plenty of people saying it's shapes. It's everything about the spatial world in my way of thinking about it, right? So what I expect to happen in my marks is for the 3D world to start showing up early and often, as well as this world, right? But it doesn't mean we're trying to get the 3D world. We're just painting the visual order of effects. And it produces that, where what you're noticing is either in harmony with what's happening in nature or not. And it's also getting us this, right? Which is where things are located in relation to each other, on an angle and so on. Okay? I hope that comes across. This is where I would love to have had. I should have kept you here, Shawn, and had you on the screen with me. So point 4 in this part 2 is avoiding simplistic, linear 1, 2, 3 thinking rather than 3 steps forward and 2 back, right? Now that has to do with trying to make something permanent before you can. So remember, the first couple notes you put down are the closest thing to a pig in a poke of anything you're going to write, or anything mark you're going to make. You're putting it out in the middle of absolutely nowhere. You say, here's the top and there's the bottom. You better look at your composition. Those guys have no moorings at all. Well, they might have some. But by the time you get around to 2 or 3 things, you'll see how to adjust those first few marks. And that's all I'm trying to say. So rather than thinking, I got to fix this and make it solid, fix this and make it solid, before you know it, you're cramped up. Everything, you're kind of paralyzed. You're not in a flexible mode. I think I do talk about this later, but this is very related to it. So most people say, I want to get this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then the whole thing is done. But really what's happening is you get this, and then this, and then that, and then now you have to go back and review how all these things relate to each other, right? And all sorts of corrections are going to go on about those things. So that's why I say, again, in the Bonnat rule, make it as like as you can the first time. The implication ought to be in what he's saying, ought to be taken in what he's saying, to be, you can't make it all that well the first time, but make it as like as you can. But don't torture yourself trying to get it so perfect that you can build something else perfectly on top of it. No. Make it as like as you can the first time, but get around, right? And you're going to make it more like by having more players to relate to. Remember, having all the witnesses in the room corrects everything, right? And remember, the truth is not in the individual parts. The truth, and this is a historian talking, he says, it's these 30 things that make the facts. It's not this fact and that fact and that fact of history. In history, you need an accumulation of things to have any idea what just happened over there, in 16th century France. You've got to be able to see more data. Okay. If you could follow that idea, you really want to comprehend history. Well, you want to comprehend the visual impression, you got to get around and around and around. Don't believe you can get one thing and one thing and one thing and one thing. At some point, and we all saw this as we were students, we saw that by the time you got around and around and around and you were exhausted, you're finally realizing what you really had. And that was too late because you're too tired and you're thinking, oh, I'll just finish it. And, you wind right down into nothing. I'm hoping you can follow that. Okay. So this is part 2. I'm going to go off to I'm going to do part 3. Again, I'm going to be wearing the same clothes. So if you're seeing this, notice the 3 parts of this video called Easy to Understand, Hard to Do. I'm hoping these are easy enough to understand, by the way, and I am trying to clarify them, but I'm talking about them as the things that give students, and me and my relationship students, the most difficulty, the most grief. For, first of all, me being clear about expressing them, and secondly, students figuring out how to systematically to build them into their disciplined body and make themselves consistent users of these kinds of things. So I know we've talked about these before. Don't misunderstand that I already do know that. But consider that what I'm trying to do is, as I've said before, to follow the modality of if the question comes up, even if it's sort of the same, let's just address it again. Make a different package out of it. All right. So that's the end of part 2. And again, I want to thank David and Daniel and for your guys' contributions. Everybody for your sharing and subscribing, and keep it coming, guys. Your likes. And I really do hope it's of some benefit to you as you attempt to approach the world as a visual impressionist, an appearance-based impressionist. All right. So that's part 2, and I'll see you in part 3 or somewhere else first before that. In any case, these, as I said, these may not be in linear progression. That'll be fine with me. It'll be up to Mr. Producer. Might be fun for us. All right. So there we are. Thank you very much, and see you in the next one, or another one.